So the idea, hi Lauren, did I miss your, did you say something? Good morning. So golden mean principle is essentially saying that by existing in an extreme, it will cause the system, whatever this system is, whether it's an ecosystem, whether it's a solar system, whether it's the physical body, there are these systems in the universe. Hey Vicky, good morning. Thanks for joining. So today is golden mean principle, or the principle of balance. And if we're going to deliver the transcendental approach, this embodiment mindful approach, these are the first two beginning things that we would talk about. So the first one, and we talked about this last week, would be the nature of attention. So, and we talked about that in our previous study group. The nature of attention. Jean, you have the exact same attention I do. It has never aged. Think about reflect upon your attention for a moment. When you were a young child, your mind was very different. Your body was very different. Your emotional, biological state was very different than it is now, but your attention was not. And if you can look back in your memory, you'll see that you're always looking at it through the same lens of attention. That hasn't changed. It hasn't aged. It's not old or new. It just is, and we're sharing it. What's kind of groovy about that is any person who has ever lived is sharing the exact same attention because we are it. So the nature of attention when it's going through the human organism, or really any organism so far as we can tell, probably there's some other aspects to awareness and attention that we're not able to put words around just yet, I'm sure. But we see this in animals, we see this in other types of, for some reason a tardigrade came to mind. Those little indestructible creatures that can live in 300 degree, negative 300 degrees, positive 300 degrees. They can reduce their water to 2% so that they can go into like a protective hibernation stage. But then they can also elongate their molecules and basically become 99% water, and then they become like this liquidy thing, and then you can chop a little piece of them off and they'll regenerate if you can get through that I guess it's an ectoskeleton, I don't know, because I also heard they don't have a proper nervous system, and by proper I mean one that we can recognize. So attention is probably still the same. It's the same attention that's funneling through that creature, and it's directing its attention. If you touched its, oh Lauren, I don't know. I didn't see that when I was reading about them. I'll have to look that up. Probably a long ass time. The article definitely said that when humans are long gone and our atmosphere and our climate changes, tardigrades will be very adaptable, and they'll continue to change over time, and years of evolution. Oh God, yeah, probably since the earliest stages of Earth's evolution for that type of adaptability to occur. So they can just adapt to changes in their environment so eloquently. Of course, like why wouldn't we assume that at this point they're sentient? What we would consider sentience. Why not? I mean, just because we can't communicate with them doesn't mean that they're not sentient creatures that are able to communicate with one another. That would be absurd for us to assume that. And yet, I think oftentimes that is the assumption, but that's not the point. So, we've talked about the nature of attention, and now we can talk about attention in relationship to the golden mean principle, because everything about T is in relationship to the golden mean principle. It's a fundamental structure of this embodiment approach. Does that make sense so far? So golden mean principle, according to Socrates, is very simple. You can use anything. So he used courage. If you have too much courage, it could look like foolishness. You're reckless abandon. You're the first to run in, and to onlookers that may look like bravery, but when you don't come back, that looks a lot like stupidity. And then no courage, well, then that looks like the inability to do anything. That looks like cowardice. So Socrates postulated that we were hoping to achieve just the right amount of courage. So when we look at ecosystems, when we look at solar systems, when we look at the human system, if we exist in an extreme for too long, that system will try to rebalance and realign itself. Does that make sense? So this isn't a good or bad thing. This is just the nature of the universe itself, constantly seeking this homeostasis, this way that it can interact with itself harmoniously. Have you noticed that in the world around? That it starts to find this imbalance to balance to imbalance to balance, and it's that wavelength thing that we see in the universe, and that's really cool. And take an ecosystem. If there's an extreme introduced to that ecosystem, it will change. The ecosystem and the balance will change. It could change to an ecosystem that is no longer recognizable to the previous ecosystem. Does that make sense? So it doesn't mean that life is necessarily going to be completely extinguished, although that could be a possibility. It just depends on what's occurring. But before I continue, does that make sense? That's not good or bad. That's just the nature of how the universe does things. Our star will go supernova, and then it will fall in on itself, and it will do something new in some way. So we see it in solar systems, we see it in our planetary systems, and we see it in our own body. If you exist in an extreme for too long, your body will start to create a new type of homeostasis that is unrecognizable potentially to the other homeostasis, and the other one may not be very good for you. It's just that's the nature of the body, is to try to find a balance so that it can maintain efficiency. The universe wants to use the least amount of energy possible. These are universal principles. We see it everywhere around us. So this is a principle of T. It is a cornerstone of my mind and how I interact with the world. So that's what I have to share. And this is how I word it and communicate it. So there is this thing that we call the principle of balance. And then here comes the pessimist in my head, the devil's advocate. And it's like, well, balance is different for everyone. True. You have a different body, you have a different life, you have a different everything compared to me. But we can feel balance and not balance. We are feeling entities. We're like a lightning rod with lightning striking us and then the electricity going through us and then into the ground. We are that harnessing instrument, and we can feel the universe and the world around us. So with that being said, we can individually feel when we are existing in an extreme. Whether we're choosing to pay attention to it or not, very often we can still feel it. We don't really, sometimes, especially when there's no deliberate attention, we don't recognize this until much later. Even sometimes people have to help us recognize it because we just don't see what's occurring because there's no attention on the moment as it happens. We can't see ourselves as things are occurring if our mind is not deliberate. Or maybe you do, maybe you don't, but that's leave at the mercy of the wind. And I would like odds a little bit better than 50-50. And actually with the world around us, it's less than 50-50. We're not set up for 50-50 in the world around us right now. There's so much going on and trying to pull at our attention. No, it's like 20-80, pulling us towards unconsciousness. Still not an excuse, but that's the way things sure seem, if nothing else. So does this make sense so far? We're talking about the principle of balance. We're talking about the golden mean principle. Everything that we've been doing from 2017 until right now has really been based around that principle, that we use our cognitive attention training to become aware of how we feel so that we can feel what is in and out of balance. And then when we start to find more of a balance, we find power. And in that power of balance, we're more adaptable. We can move. We can go a little bit left. We can go a little bit right. And actually, Gene, I think that's what this next little chart will explain, is that adaptability factor, what that feels like when you are feeling a little bit more balanced. Even when things are very uncertain. I have a lot of things right now in my life that are swirling around me, and there's a ton of uncertainty. But my practice keeps me rooted in the present moment, and in that I feel balance. If I start to look at all the uncertainty, that won't feel balanced, because it's moving, it's changing, it's going in and out of form in some examples. So if I just focus or think about that, heaven forbid, I start to think about that and I try to understand it and I try to control it, I'll lose all my balance. And then before you know it, what I'm creating is a product of thinking and imbalance, as opposed to feeling into the moment and observing myself as things occur, and reminding myself of my desire and what I really want. All that makes sense so far? Just make sure no one's having trouble getting in. What's up with Rita? She can't get in. No one needed to give up. Come. So, can I answer any questions about those things before we go on to how that relates to tea and everything else? See, Lisa? Oh, no. Ask if there's any questions. Let me do that first. Sometimes I ask if there's any questions, and then I just go into another 25-minute spiel. But does that make sense so far? What we're talking about, the principle of balance, the golden mean principle. This is not something that, okay, so golden mean principle is Socrates, but we could start to look at this as yin and yang as well. Yin and yang is moving, changing, sometimes more yin, sometimes more yang. Very rarely should it be 90% one or 2% the other, 98% one or 2% the other. That's a severe, gross, disproportional imbalance. And that will cause the whole thing to break down if that continues. And it will maybe reform in some way and unrecognizable. When earnest as a physical, biological entity, when my heart no longer sustains a beat, my body no longer carries that synaptic electrical connection, and the light of my attention inside of this brain, it's all going to change. It doesn't mean it ends. It just means that something different and unrecognizable is very likely going to occur. So can I answer any questions about that before I go into the next spiel? Because then I have a whole nother part of this. So the principle of balance. How do we live that? You know, it's fun to talk about. Like intellectually, this shit makes sense easily. Like we look at it in words and we're just like, oh yeah, balance. Of course, get it. And then T is how we cross the divide between theory and application, and we learn to feel what is balanced. And then when we're starting to go away from balance, we have a practice that will point us back to the moment that is happening now. We can engage it, we can expand with it, we can move with it, we can connect with it. And at the end of my 110 years, I'll look at everything and, you know, I'll look at the people that I love, the things that we have created together. And I truly believe that whenever that happens, I'm going to use death as my advisor. So 110 isn't guaranteed. I think I can make it there if I keep my, you know, balance, stick to my principles. But I truly feel that as long as I'm connecting, as long as I'm paying attention and feeling everything, that's the best I can do. You know, that really is. What we're feeling, you know, that can be wildly different from person to person. But are you really feeling it, you know, or are we just creating the electro just? I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but if it's just, that is a gross disproportional imbalance that will cause severe, extreme psychological and potentially physical, socially physical suffering. And that means suffering on a global scale, war and viruses and all of these things can begin to occur when we are out of balance. So if we want to be more in balance on a societal level, a global level, the only way to do that is to do it on an individual level first. That has to occur. If that doesn't occur, this will never be accomplished through, you can't really accomplish balance through force. Because the moment that you let go of that force, it just really So have you ever had someone like pushing against you, and then when you let go, they just, you know, I don't know, fell forward, they like crushed forward? That would be a similar thing. Like you're trying to use force to maintain the balance or the pressure there. And then when you let go, it just keeps on going. All right. Any questions about that? What's up with Edith? Is she able to get in? Force is a short-term solution. I think it could be, but when I use the word force, I'm implying that that's not the most efficient way to do whatever it is you're doing. So by using force, it's not the most efficient, but sometimes we're too far beyond the most efficient anyway, that maybe a little force is going to be a temporary band-aid at best. So it's really hard for me to jump on board force as any sort of solution. I'm not 100% convinced of that. But let's say somebody was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Oh, you mean like Gene, tell me do you mean, like forces of the, like force like gravity, or force like trying
No,
to...
I meant sometimes in order to have the situation appear to you to be balanced, you may have to force responses from people who don't agree with you. It's only a short-term solution as long as you can maintain that power, physical force over them. Once you cannot maintain that, then that's why I call it a temporary solution.
I personally wouldn't view it as an option. That's just me. So there's a lot of things going on in my life right now, and I'm sure there's things going on in your life right now. And here's the principle of other people. You have the light of attention going through your skull, and I guess that's a weird way to say it. I'm sorry, Gene, but you have the light of attention. You have, you know, life and everything flowing through you. You are that instrument. And to use force in any way, shape, or form is just not in principle. So it will result in some sort of suffering. It's just something that we can guarantee will occur.
Yeah, I didn't want to argue the point. I'm just
Oh yeah, for sure.
that we make laws because
right.
not
Yeah.
everybody agrees on behavior, so we have to enforce a law. You know, you have to wear your seatbelt.
Right.
I mean,
No, I get that.
And that's a force issue because some people don't want to wear a seatbelt.
Right. No, I get that. Yeah,
that's what I meant.
That makes sense to me. And what we're doing is when the force that Gene is talking about is when we're interacting with other people. And see, that's the thing about other people, is that we have no control over other people whatsoever. See, that's the thing. Like, relatively, I could have control over this object. You know, I'm doing stuff with it. You know, we could use the word control. Like he was controlling the object in his hand. Fine. Now, when we start to use the word control over other people or force over other people, we are violating so much principle that we end up with laws and government and lines that are imaginary that divide us, and a 1% and a 99% and an upper class, middle class, lower class, you know, and now we have all of that shit. It is the way it is, though. I'm not declaring war on that, because that doesn't help me get to balance. So thinking about it, declaring war on the imbalance is adding imbalance to imbalance, and that will cause balance in a manner of speaking, but it may be completely unrecognizable, meaning the human race may cease to exist in that example of rebalance. I don't want to get all doom and gloom, though, so let's not go there. But does that make sense? So we're talking about the principle of balance. It's a very tricky thing for some folks to talk about, but I think that we have a very clear way of looking at it, especially when I tell you, you can feel balance or not balance. We've all felt it. We know what it feels like. And the chart that I go into, this is kind of a new chart, but that will really, I think, explain it, or, you know, organize the information. Does that make sense, though? Any questions so far, Lisa, Carly? Good morning. Hi, Karen. There you go, Ida. I knew you could do it. Any questions about this principle of balance? All right. No questions. Lisa, I know you got a question. What's your question? Maybe you don't. Okay. Lisa doesn't have a question. All right, so this is the whiteboard. And I will point out that this little center is a mind without resistance. Do I need to draw that chart? Do you guys remember that chart? The resistance through the water. If we add resistance, it turns to mud, it doesn't flow. You know, the tube is the human body, the receptor between the infinite and the finite. And it's either flowing through us without obstruction, or we're obstructing that flow. So we remember that chart, right? When the mind is not in R, most resistance is thinking. We're resisting the present moment rather than engaging it and loving it and connecting to it and feeling it and adapting to it, because we're too busy pointing the light of our attention, usually unconsciously, we're not choosing to do this necessarily, on our own cognition, which is not sensory perception. Your thoughts are not sensory perception. That's your output. Thoughts are happening, they're occurring, they're going out into the universe. That's not coming in. Sensory perception implies information from the world around us. We're taking it in. We're learning through sight, through sound, through smell, through taste, through touch, through proprioception, through internal attention on our bones and our muscles. We can start to feel when things aren't right earlier and earlier, because we're so keenly aware of where this muscle and bone is supposed to be. And it's like that doesn't hurt, but you know, I feel maybe I slept on this wrong or something, you know. Does that make sense? So resistance is not peace. And that R, if that becomes an extreme, and it has, it did for me for 30 years. And I'm sure every single person here to some extent can relate to just charging that R. Thinking about this problem, thinking about that problem, thinking about how I'm going to control this imaginary future. Is this decision going to be the right decision? Is this decision going to be the wrong decision? And so there's this constant swirling that we call change. And what the human mind wants to do is it wants to predict that change. It wants to understand it before it happens. It wants to control it. And I think that that's a huge, huge misunderstanding of how we should be interacting with the world around us. That's not peace. That's not harmony. That's the opposite of harmony when you're attempting to control something. So a mind that isn't doing that isn't just focusing on I, me, my problems, what I want. Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this going to benefit me? Comparing and contrasting, thinking about my wants and desires constantly. It removes me from the present moment. That's what I mean by I'm resisting it. Sometimes I'm resisting it habitually, unconsciously. I don't mean to, although I'm not doing anything not to. So that's still my responsibility. And then sometimes that is active. It's intentional, and I call that cherry picking. When we intentionally push ourselves away from the present moment, we allow that to occur even though we know what's occurring. Cognitive attention training, we see ourselves in real time and then we still choose to go down a path of unconsciousness. That's cherry picking at its worst. Worst. So that peace is a feeling of a mind that is not resisting the present moment. Once that peace exists, it's like a little hole, and all the water swirls down into it, and it transforms into joy, vibrancy, a type of excitement. It's not the, woo, I just won the lottery or I'm going on this vacation type of excitement. It's just like I'm fucking alive type of excitement, like this baseline of excitement. So it's not necessarily an emotional, but it's more of a vibrational excitement, if that makes sense. It can be emotional, and I'll talk more about how that works with this hydrostasy circle. So a mind that is not resisting the present moment, but rather is engaging it on purpose, there's a lot of peace in that. And that peace leads to everything else. And I still feel that peace though, but it still leads to all of these other feelings when we're connecting to the moment happening now. And that is very balanced. It feels very firm, very rooted, powerful, like I got this. Personal power feels very rooted, very centered. Personal power doesn't become power over other people until ego gets involved. And then when that happens, it can be very tricky. And I would say that the world is the way it is to some extent because the accumulation of personal power is a principle of intention and will. How to direct personal power responsibly, however, they don't teach that in school. So there could be political figures who have a lot of intention and will in certain areas, and they accumulate a lot of I can do these certain things, and yet there's no peace. And so the way they direct their personal power typically is about I, me, self. So I don't want to get political here, but you guys, I'm sure you can connect those dots. So the idea here, though, is that a mind that is not resisting the present moment is getting closer to the center of this circle in this chart, this way that I'm choosing to describe stuff. That center is peace. Inner peace, of course, that's what we're talking about. Eventually, if these theories hold, the inner peace will manifest outer peace. The inner balance will manifest outer balance, even if it's not what you expected it to look like. Because sometimes our expectations are shaped by the carved block, psychological suffering, conditioning. Does that make sense so far, though? Ida, any questions? Do you feel good about any of that, or can I word something differently to make it more relatable? We've all had that peace whenever that resistance is interrupted.
I'm
Maybe,
having pro-
yes. Mhm.
I'm having problems with getting in on my laptop. It seems ridiculous. It's
I'm
the
sorry.
passcode, case sensitive.
Oh, it's
It's
case
just coming
sensitive.
up.
Yeah.
It's coming up incorrect all the time.
So how are
So
you here right now then?
I'm not really sure how to operate on the tablet. I've got in,
Oh,
but I don't really know where all the buttons are, so I can't
well,
really contribute much. But yeah, everything sounds good so far.
you're doing it right now though. You're communicating with me
Yes, but I
perfectly
don't
fine.
know where. If I press something, I might end up doing something crazy, you know?
Yeah.
All these. Oh, there we are. There's wee
Did,
buttons at the bottom.
did you
I
get it?
just have to do a wee bit. Yeah, okay.
The
Carry
Wii
on.
buttons. All right. So what I have noticed from embodying this practice, and so we've talked a little bit about the nature of attention. We've talked a little bit about balance because this entire practice is based around fostering the feeling of balance, fostering physical balance in our life experience, but without trying to control, without trying to manipulate. Because I just know, like this is maybe the knowing that is in my DNA from previous lives. I don't know, but I just know that we can do this. I know that I can do this. I know that I can find this because I found it in small bits, and it's starting to gain momentum. So there's no reason in terms of principle why that wouldn't continue to accumulate if I continue to do the practice. But the peace creates This and the hydrostasy bubble, there's actually a little bit more to it in terms of specific points of attention, but I don't have to get into that to explain what it feels like. So I have created this bubble of peace. Does that make sense? So it's like if we just look at it in terms of this chart, I can go a little bit left or I can go a little bit right. And we could say this is a little bit of irritation over here, you know, getting towards the edge of my bubble. You know, maybe my dog is barking in my ear or some shit like that. Or, you know, now I'm over here when the customer asks me, what's your highest tester? And it's like, there's so much more to cannabis than what's your highest tester. And that's one of the things in the dispensary world that just kind of irritates the tenders. And so, you know, I hear that and I feel a little bit of, you know, I'm not outside of peace though. Like I can still feel peace. I'm a human being. I have not achieved unexcelled perfect enlightenment. I'm not Buddha. You know, I have to drive to work in the snow. And that creates a little bit of focus tension. You know, when you're focusing so much on the road, you create a little bit of focus tension. Has anybody else ever had focus tension? Like, cause it's not a bad thing. It's just some of the things, it's an imbalance. When you're focusing on something so much, it creates a tension in your body. That's why we don't do that all the time, because it would be existing in an extreme. Now, if you train, your version of the extreme could be a little bit different. Or your carte blanche, you know, the totality of your experience, your extremes could be a little bit different. So for me, cold water is going to be a quick extreme. For Ida, not as much, because she trains to get into that cold water. So she's creating a different type of balance, but she can still feel it when she's existing in an extreme if she's paying attention. So that's her garden to tend to, not mine. That's why I shouldn't really be telling anybody else what to do, because you have your own balance to navigate and to interact with. So the key to the principle of balance is that I'm not going to always be in this center of, hello, everything is absolutely balanced. I am Buddha. Ask me questions and I will give you the exact answers. I don't know what to do as Buddha. Like, what would I do? I have no idea. What did Buddha do all day? He sat under a tree, and I mean, that sounds cool, I suppose, but I don't know. I don't. Fine. I choose to drive it. And it provides a point of attention satisfaction. Yeah, for sure. But you see how it could, but you still get the idea of like focus tension, like, and that's not a bad thing, but if you focus like that, you do start to feel a little bit of tension in the body. You could only attempt to de-arm a bomb for so long before that tension starts to kind of be counterproductive. Or the focus of attention starts to feel like tension because you're existing in an extreme. That's why I don't do just peripheral vision, because then everything could become so abstract-ish that could potentially become an extreme. I go back and forth between focus and defocus. So I don't know what it's like to exist in a defocused extreme, because I was aware of these principles when I started doing that. So I don't want you to let me know. But if you do exist in that extreme, then you could definitely provide feedback, but don't try to do that. That would be weird. All right, so the world around me, shit's happening. Other people, I have to adapt to relationships with other people. I have to adapt at work. I have to adapt at home. I have to adapt on the road. But I don't have to go outside of my hydrostasy bubble, my bubble where I can still feel peace with sadness, with joy, and a certain type of excitement. So I don't have to give up on the human experience and all of that it has to offer, but I can still stay within a certain circumference that I feel peace. Does that make sense? And this is all in alignment with the principle of balance. The balance is the feeling of peace, and we feel that peace when the mind is not resisting. So we have a practice that engages the present moment, that dissolves that resistance, that allows the energy to flow. We feel more balanced, we feel more peace. So Karen, you were mentioning the other day that if you didn't have your practice, shit would hit the fan, like it would be different. Because Karen, I don't mean to put you on blast if you're not able to talk, but what isn't that? Didn't you mention that? I think you mentioned that the other day.
Yeah, I mentioned, yeah, that, well, when I was at the grocery store, I don't know which
Oh, right.
which example, but
That one's
also
perfect. Yeah.
the amount of anxiety I used to have too.
Hmm.
But yeah, with the grocery store, you know, anybody can annoy you there, but
It's true.
it's almost like a microcosm of society, you know,
Like driving.
sometimes.
Driving
Yeah.
is a microcosm of society.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to write that book called Microcosm of Society. Somebody write that down. That's a good title, isn't it? Like there's so many examples I could give that are a microcosm of society. You can get from point A to point B, and that point A and point B could be 500 miles, and you don't remember very much of it. You weren't interacting with it. Your mind was thinking about something else, but yet you were still driving. You were still navigating the motor vehicle. You still arrived there without crashing into anything, maybe, probably, sometimes. But yet you weren't conscious, you weren't deliberate, you weren't gentle, you weren't mindful, you weren't aware, you weren't, and I don't mean you, you know, I'm just saying the person wasn't relaxed, they weren't. So that's a microcosm of everything else that's happening in the human experience. What did we call the title? What was it? Oh, Karen, what did you say?
Microcosm of society.
Oh, a microcosm of society. I love it. That's the name of a book. Can I have that, Karen? Or microcosm of society?
Sure, you can have it.
Woo!
Write
Write
it
that
down.
Go with
Write
it.
it down.
Yeah, you gotta write it. I can't find a pen. Microcosm of Society, Part 1. And then I'll never write the Part 2 because that's what I do. Okay, so is this making sense that my practice has created this little orbit that I can still adapt to the world around me and feel peace, but I'm not necessarily in the exact center where I'm just zenned out. I feel that often, true, the closer I get to it. But what I want to point out with this image that we have of the circle is that nothing is stagnant. Everything is moving. There is no sitting and resting in that center. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? Now I'm using this image and this picture to describe something. So this image, although it looks stagnant, just like yin and yang, it is not. It's moving. That's the reason for this hydrostasy circle, is because I have to adapt to the movement. So there is no there. Perfect, Lauren. Yes. I get closer to the center, but my existence is a form of extreme in a manner of speaking. My ability to stand is muscular tension. You know how Tai Chi people, Lisa, say that you should be completely relaxed? If you're completely relaxed, you will fall down like a cat and look like a human mud puddle, you know? So you got to have some muscular tension involved, otherwise there is no human form per se. Does that make sense? Maybe there is resting in the center permanently, and that's Buddha. That's unexcelled perfect enlightenment. Well, I don't know. You got to go talk to someone else about that. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, though, but that's not my vote. I have no reason to believe that after 30 years of creating psychological suffering, that I even want to dissolve the ego at this point. Maybe I could just interact with it a little bit more efficiently. Because I've already created it. So it's not like I can uncreate it, right? Once something's created, it can't be destroyed. It can change. It can become unrecognizable from the previous one. So hopefully the ego that I create is one that isn't focusing on itself and, you know, attaching and clinging and all of that. The inputs, sensory perception is changing always. And I mean, every attention is always moving. That's why we say, give me your attention. Attention's not stagnant. I could look at this for 50 minutes and you might say, well, that's a no, it's flowing. I'm connecting. It's like, that's the nature of connection, is from paying attention. Attention is given and then something is received. And that something is peace and love and joy and connection and vibrancy. So I can feel that along with human emotion. that is a result of all of this movement that I have to do. Does that make sense? Do you feel like this explains things okay? Like, is this a good way to explain some of the things that's occurring with the tea practice, what we want from the tea practice? I think it really sets expectations, in air quotes, by removing this mythicalness, the mythical figure. So, and I don't want to say, I'm sorry, if you believe that Buddha isn't mythical, you know, then don't let me, I don't want to, I use that word. Maybe that wasn't the best word to use, but I don't see it. You know, I don't see a person existing and resting in that center in any way that I view as desirable. So I don't really view sitting by a river for 12 hours a day desirable. I mean, that's fine. I like rivers. I'm sure that guy's having a great time. But that's just not what I want to do. I want to do other stuff. I have other desires. I want to sit in a stand and sell my books and some of Ida's art. I want to sell the rocks, and we can sell coffee cups, and everybody drinks coffee. So, I mean, we can sell some stuff. It makes Ida a little bit of coin. It makes me a little bit of coin. And, you know, that's the vision. So whatever moves towards that is in my alignment. Does that make sense now? So it removes the perfect, the unexcelled perfect enlightenment. Perfect. And it's like, oh man, maybe next lifetime, you know, okay, fine. You know, I won't work it all out now, so we'll just shift that to the next Ernest, and then maybe he'll get it right. Yeah. Okay. So the idea, though, is that we are always adapting, always moving, generating emotion, sometimes thinking, sometimes less thinking. Our attention is hopefully more and more and more deliberate the more we're existing in this practice. But I'd like to talk about two forms of existing outside of the hydrostasy bubble. Two different ways that we interact outside of that bubble. So there's an unconscious way and a conscious way. Now, the conscious way knows that it can't stay there forever, that it's got to get in and out. The unconscious way doesn't know that, and it wants to hold on to it, to try to control it, to try to cling and grasp and manipulate and own these extremes. Because the extremes have feeling. The mind likes it sometimes. It's like, woo, I'm on a high-flying disc. I'm in the vortex. Well, all right. Yeah. All right. Like, talk to me in a month or two. Or you have a lot of money. Talk to me in 20 or 30 years when your, you know, skin starts sagging a little bit, you know. I don't know why I use that as an example. I think it's because I'm getting hamster cheeks from yeah, quarantine cheeks, I'll call them. Getting a little chubs. It's where I start to hold my weight first. It goes straight to my cheeks, and then it'll go to my belly. And then from there, yeah, existing in an extreme, for sure. So there's two ways that we can interact outside of the hydrostasy bubble. If it's unconscious, it's not going to benefit us. And I mean big time. If we unconsciously indulge and engage extremes, we end up with atom bombs, we end up with genocides, we end up with coronaviruses, we end up, not saying that was manufactured, but I mean, I don't see this in an enlightened society because of the way that they interact with one another, the way that they interact with the world in harmony. So there's less viruses, there's less cancers, there's less sickness and death and you know, early death. You know, I can see in an enlightened society, the average age is 110. It's like, yeah, we can live a long ass time because we're not, you know, I'll get into this, but I've had a new way of looking at how outside becomes inside in terms of the human body. Like, we're taking things in, and the input output. Food is a form of input. You know, what I'm watching on TV is a form of input. The things that I'm choosing to listen to is a form of input. And in an enlightened society, they are consciously, deliberately aware of all of that input. Whereas if you're unconscious, it's just going to shape you habitually. Yeah, polluted input for sure. So the other way of existing outside of the hydrostasy bubble is called a burst of flow. If Gene needs to save a human being from a burning car and he picks it up somehow and he has no fucking idea how he could do anything like that, but he does it, that is an extreme. Gene doesn't do that all the time. No, I mean, I don't know. I shouldn't put anybody in a box. Okay. Never seen Gene without a shirt on, so he could be, just totally cut under there, heavy lifting, all that. I don't know.
No, only once or twice. That's it.
Okay, that's fair. So the two ways that a person can interact outside of the hydrostasy bubble is the same way that a person can interact with everything, conscious or unconscious. Conscious implies flow, awareness. When he did everything that he did, he was consciously aware of it, focused, locked in, just do energy. Afterwards, he may not be able to remember it because that's when all the other stuff starts to flood in, the thinking and the old energy that he's not necessarily in that extreme anymore, so it's difficult to remember. So let's say, Ida, publishers, oh, no, they don't have Publishers Clearinghouse in your country. So, Vicky, let's say Publishers Clearinghouse comes to your house and gives you $25 million. Very likely, I don't want to put you in a box. If they came to my house, I would jump into a little bit of an extreme of excitement for maybe a second or two. Maybe longer, I don't know. But I would probably go to a little bit of an extreme. But I'm not going to stay there because I lost peace in that extreme, and I don't want to lose peace for very long, if ever, hopefully. So that oh my God, I'm in Las Vegas and I got all this money and I'm just, living it up and YOLO. Yeah, that's an extreme. And that extreme will leave us with nothing to stand on when it's not there. And we've seen so many examples of that in the world and maybe a little bit in our own life experience. So we have a burst of conscious flow, just do energy, where we're able to do things maybe that we didn't even know that we could do. And then we have existing unconsciously in an extreme, which usually involves indulgence. And it involves being so far removed from peace that we don't feel it anymore. And maybe we get so far removed from it that it requires a vacation to feel any semblance of it, or a drug, or an alcohol, or an experience. I got to start jumping out of planes to feel alive. Is there anything wrong with jumping out of planes if that's your thing? No. Jump out of whatever you want to jump out of. But if you do that because you think you need to, that's very likely because we're existing in an extreme and we're not feeling peace and we're not feeling natural vibrancies. Exactly. So Vicky says, practicing staying grounded when I'm on a high helps me do the same when I'm on a low. And then you can still feel peace that way because that requires a deliberate nature. Perfect. Exactly. That's balance. Can you guys see how we have the excitement, but I'm not going to indulge it. I'm not going to, put unnecessary attention on it. I'm not going to blow it up because if it does, there will be an attachment, there will be a clinging, and there will be suffering. And sometimes that whirlwind of suffering that we're creating for ourselves can create an environment for suffering for other people. They have to take responsibility for their minds too, but we are interacting with one another after all. So the idea of the golden mean principle is that if we want to feel balance, the third pillar. If we want to find flow outside of this circle of peace, third pillar. It's the same. That is the key to balance. That is the key to non-resistance. That is the key to no force. That is the key to not trying to control. And if it's the key to peace, then it's the key to love. It's the key to joy. It's the key to vibrancy. And the third pillar is, where is your mind and did you put it there? Wherever that is. We're all really different people. Gene, you have a very different mind, a very different experience. You like different things. Your attention can be deliberately somewhere completely different than mine. But as we talked about yesterday, when I put attention on my body, I am engaging with my peripheral nervous system. That is a form of input. That is inputting, even if it's my skin or my bones, it's still inputting up into my cognition. It's communicating via my spine up into my brain, and now I can communicate with my limbs. That's dope. Now I can move and feel. Feeling, exactly. And that can become a dominant sensory perception of how you take in information from the world around you. It doesn't have to be just vision, sight, which is the dominant perception for the common mind. Commonly it is. All right, that's all I got really about balance. I can talk more about the chart if you guys want to. But I think that would pretty much cover the topic. Yeah, microcosms of society. The workplace very often can be a microcosm of society. I love that. That's a good title. All right, any questions, comments, or concerns? We could talk a little bit more about application. But does this principle of balance make sense? How I'm describing it. It's maybe not how other people describe balance. I don't know. But I have been pretty consistent with how I do. So how I describe and how I share it with T, does it make sense?
Yeah.
So what about thinking? Well, too much thinking will lead to suffering. But then again, not thinking at all, well, you're going to have trouble communicating with people. If I never think, how can I tell you about how I feel? Well, maybe I could paint. That's an option. But I still think not thinking ever could also be just one opposite extreme, because we want to communicate. But I don't know, if you had another way to communicate, maybe you could work that out to where you wouldn't need to think verbal words and you would still be able to fully communicate yourself. And then you'd probably still be fine, without that. But as humans, we want to communicate. We want to share how we feel. We really do want people to know. And if we resist that, which a lot of men resist that. Gene, would you agree that a lot of men resist sharing how they feel or even acknowledging how they feel or what they're thinking?
Yeah, it's a common thing. I was going to give an example of little children, since there's so many around me these days, twins here and twins there. The young ones don't speak, but they express themselves. It's pretty clear most of the time. The frustration comes in because I'm used to communicating by speech, so I'm looking for them to communicate with me that way. But if I'm in the bubble, if I'm at peace and I just breathe and pay attention, they communicate almost perfectly. I mean, they're expressing exactly what they're feeling. They just don't use words to do it. My challenge is to be sensitive to their language, which isn't words; it's something else.
That makes sense.
But they do express themselves. And waiting for them to speak in order to express themselves is my issue. It's not their issue.
Yeah, I mean, and thinking is a communication part of our brain. We just choose to think in words. That's what we've created. But the children haven't as much yet, so they find other ways to communicate. And then they've also proven in other countries that we can communicate with color instead of written words. And then that would be a total different way to interact with that same communication part of our brain. Words are in the communication part of our brain, folks. That's what it's for. Fundamentally, it's a form of communication. And if you're just talking to yourself, you're trying to communicate with yourself, about things you already know. Sometimes, though, that's okay, because it's like an affirmation. It's like you're learning, and so you voice it. I call that the voice of power, and that's okay. I'm not going to declare war on that voice. That's an extreme for me right now. To have no thought is an extreme that I'm not interested in, but I'm also not interested in indulging thought so that I'm not present, mindful, feeling my life experience, because that is my number one goal. That's what's most important. Does that make sense? I'll mute my camera because Shane is going in and out. She's taking a shower. All right, can I answer any questions about this? Any thoughts or anything occur? So I'll give you a couple more seconds. Karen, Carly, does that all make sense?
Yes. So,
Mhm.
the balance and the peace and the point of attention. So, if you keep your point of attention to some degree,
Yes,
that's related to the peace that you.
yes,
Okay.
directly related, as a matter of fact.
Okay. So that interacting with society, you have that background piece.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly right. But Karen, why would I have that background piece while interacting with society? What's required to have the background piece?
Well, you're holding your point of attention. You're
Bingo.
present. You're
Perfect.
mindful. Yeah.
Yes, exactly right. Yep.
You're still practicing.
Yes. And based on what we were talking about yesterday, what is my number one background point of attention? Do you remember? What would I use as my primary point of attention while interacting with everything else?
In a point of attention, I don't remember. Oh,
My body.
yeah. Okay.
My body in space and time.
Right.
Like I can
Okay.
always feel that. Like you can feel it right now, Karen. Of course you could, and you can feel it when you wake up, you can feel it when you go to bed, you can feel it when you this, when you that. And then, as I talked about yesterday, the physical body has extended to the energy body, where I can feel this thing in between me and everything else. And so sometimes if my arm hurts, I don't have to put attention on my arm, I can put attention on the energy arm, if that makes sense. That's getting a little bit, I can't prove that. You know what I mean? So if you experience that for yourself, then we can talk about it. But yes, Ida,
Excuse
please.
me. Did you ever feel like years ago that you were totally living in your head and you didn't feel your body?
Yes. Like emphatically, yes, absolutely, yeah, for
I
sure.
remember,
Unless it hurt.
I remember one day going for a walk, and I had a lot of emotional distress going on, and I remember walking down the road, not really aware of my body at all, just all in my head, and actually feeling a bit like a zombie, because I didn't really have feeling in my body. I remember thinking about this and thinking, why am I not more connected to life? Because I was living in my head so much. I mean, it is years ago, like maybe 10 or 15 years ago. But it's not a very nice feeling to be unconscious like that, not aware of your body.
Well, no, now especially that I have a frame of reference, that's what we call, okay, so Ida, look at that. That is the atrophy effect. So if you're not used to looking at your body and paying attention to it, it can be difficult, right? Because you're not used to doing it.
You lose touch with it. You lose touch with how your feet feel, how it feels to sit on the ground. I remember rediscovering those things bit
Mm-hmm.
by bit, and the feeling of joy of getting to know your little toe, just parts of your body that you had over
Getting to
years.
know
Just
your little toe. That should be a poem, Ida. No,
no,
but
but
can you see how that relates to the atrophy effect though?
yeah, very much so, because you're really just so disconnected from feeling your life that my body to me was forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
And I had kind of put it into the category, well, this is just getting older. You don't sit on the floor anymore. You don't touch your toes. But getting connected with all that again through time has been such a joy, because it reminds you what Jim was saying of being a child and communicating, I suppose, with your body and with your feelings as well as with your words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's also either, if we put that in the context of the atrophy effect, because a person's not paying attention to their body for such a long period of time, to pay attention to their body feels difficult. It feels like work. But like you pointed out, when you start doing it, it gets easier and easier and easier to the point where it feels gross when you're not. That's the same thing with attention itself. Attention and paying attention to the present moment at first feels very difficult because we're not used to doing it. But then we practice and we get better and better and better until the point where it is preferred. And if I'm not paying attention to the present moment on purpose, I feel icky. It doesn't feel preferred at all. And that is exactly what we're talking about from going from one to the other.
Add thoughts into that, not feeling your body, but actually for years I was hating my body, and add that leaking power to that, not connecting with your body. Is it any wonder you don't feel very well? You know, I was feeling very probably unwell physically as well as mentally. Well, mentally first, obviously, and then it just shows you how you can reverse that process to the point where now I wouldn't, very, very rarely think badly about any part of my body, and I would realize I was doing it and put a different thought in there now. Yeah, I'm finished talking now.
My bad, I was muted. All right, so this is how it can look like in practice. We have a practice that we call T, Transcendental Embodiment Approach. You don't have to call it that if you don't want to, that's cool. But what we're doing is we're paying attention to the present moment on purpose. We have points of attention, you can call them tricks of attention, you could create games of attention, whatever you want to call it. And we'll talk more about what that is as we go along and we, go through this beginning process of basic alignment. And that's really understanding the nuts and bolts of how T works and why T works. One of the reasons that it works is because it helps us to foster balance, not existing in an extreme for any amount of time. And when we are more balanced, we can adapt. Now, here's what adaptation can look like. It looks like that way for me a little bit right now, because I do have a lot of things that are going on. So my world right now is also moving and changing just like yours is. So, the specificity of that, that's not terribly important, although I'm sure at some point we'll talk about it. But the idea is that when we're brushed up with uncertainty and we're swimming in uncertainty, we just don't know it. Like, we don't always acknowledge that we're always swimming in absolute uncertainty. There is no such thing as an absolute promise. There's no such thing as an absolute, because it's all moving, it's all changing, it's all transforming from one to the other to the one to the other, and this is a thing that the universe does. What the mind has the tendency of doing, because of the lives we've lived so far, is that's when we want to attempt and control the most, is when things aren't going how we want them to be. And you could watch your practice break down in sequence. The mind will start to think about the future. The mind will start to compare and contrast. The mind will start to think about wants and desires. And all of that will begin to remove you from the present moment where you feel balance. And if you remain in the present moment where you feel balance, things will move in balance and you will be able to feel that balance. So the results, what you create, will be a process of balance, even if it's not necessarily what you thought or what you desired or what you envisioned it would be. Does that make sense? Adapting, allowing, while still consciously creating. It's just not trying to control in advance. I don't have to do that. I can still plan, that's fine. I can still look at things that way, but ultimately I have to stay with my practice. That's foremost. Otherwise, nothing is going to fit. Does that make sense? Allowing, quiet the mind, quiet the ego. It doesn't say eliminate, I'm not saying to dissolve, I'm not saying to reject, I'm not saying to quiet, relax the ego. And that makes humility and acceptance, which is where the allowing is now occurring. Allowing is a happening, not a philosophy. But allowing is not passivity either. Because if something isn't serving me, it's in my benefit to redirect it, to move with it, to change with change. But to adapt appropriately doesn't mean to just stand there and let somebody punch me in the face. But it also doesn't mean declaring war on them necessarily. Sure, we can find more elegant ways to interact with the world around us when we're in flow and when we're in peace. We'll have more good ideas. Yes, Gene.
At this time, I see lots of people, at least in New York and my age or 65 and older, running around and worrying and trying to find out how they're going to get a vaccination. That they're spending lots of time on the web, chasing all day long different websites to try and find one that has an opening. And I did that for half a day. And I was way out of balance, just way out of balance. And instead, I just relaxed my mind and recognized the fact that this is all in disarray now. I have no control over what's available and what's not available. All I have to do is be ready when the time is right, to be ready when the time is right. So I got a shot. It turns out I got my first shot. But as it also turned out, at the end of the procedure, it was supposed to be, and we'll make an appointment for your second shot at the end of your first shot. Well, they didn't do that. We don't have enough stuff. We don't know what the second shot's going to be. You're on your own now. You're on your own. And finding the second shot is up to you. You have to figure out how to do it. At first, that became a problem. But it only took me about an hour to recognize that I have no control over that either. Supply will exist. There will be a new plan. I have a month to get there's a month that needs to pass before this next shot becomes available. And I just have to be aware of the opportunities. I don't have to, as some of my friends are doing, sit on the web all day long, chasing down sites, driving 60 to 70 miles to find the shot. I'm grateful that I got a shot. I have some resistance. When my turn comes, and I'll be ready. That's how I choose to deal with it now. I can't be chasing and worrying that it isn't going to exist, or I'm not going to find it, or all of the things that you might imagine that possibly could happen. So being balanced in my approach has given me some peace. I'm not chasing. That's all I need to say on that.
That makes sense. Yeah, chasing energy is definitely not always going to be deliberate, conscious energy. So typically that chasing is an attempt to control. And if you're more relaxed, you're probably going to see things when they come to you. That's called affirmations from the world around you, paying attention to where information exists, and that's right now. But yeah, that makes sense to me. That's a good example. And then we'll just do a follow-up after you get your second shot. And so the second shot is going to come or it's not. How you get there matters. I'm going to become 110. How I get there matters, right? All right, any other questions about balance? We're still keeping the study sessions to about an hour and a half-ish. The 3-hour study sessions, it's too much continuous talking for me. I don't really like that as much anymore. But balance, adaptation, that's another good example. So in terms of our practice, I could tell you a little bit, I've been talking about my practice. I've been talking about maintaining points of attention, that I can feel this bubble. And one of the ways that I have created the feeling of the bubble is by expanding into the moment, using that sensory perception, expanding proprioception, my body in space and time, and I can feel that, and that's not more, or I'm not looking at it that way. It's not heightened awareness and no. So I might still miss something because I didn't choose to pay attention to that. Somebody at work is like, "Oh, Ernest, how did you miss that?" And I'm like, "That's not where my mind was. Sorry." Like, I'm not going to see everything. It's not like this is a movie. I'm not trying to create a fictional superhero over here. So, not that there's anything wrong with superheroes who can fly and all that, but that's just not. I want peace and love, and I want to feel my life. Like, that is my desire. Everything else will fall by the wayside, and it will happen or it won't. If I do one day levitate and vibrate out of this dimension, that came to me. I can promise you. I wasn't trying to control or make that happen. And I don't expect it to be perfectly honest. I haven't been able to really see that yet. So my practice as I move forward, all of the different things that I do, I still do my defocused vision, paying attention to my whole body, my whole breath. Some of the tricks of attention that I go in and out of are the differences of vision. I'll play with different sensory perceptions. I'll listen behind me still. That's the thing, is like my oldies but goodies I'll still interact with depending on the circumstances. If I'm in the right kind of room, I'm looking at the light source. I'm definitely doing this thing that it started as an imagination process, and now it's imagination plus the feeling of the energy body. I impose that over my own body while I'm talking or while I'm interacting with the world. And that could be literal imagination. You're imagining like a shadowy energy, ethereal body, or not. You don't have to do hydrostasy. That's me. That's what I do. You can try it, and I can show you how, but that doesn't have to be your thing. That's why it's not necessarily a part of tea. The transcendental embodiment approach is set around a lot of principles, and I'm doing that just like you are, if you're doing tea. But hydrostasy is another thing based on the tea practice. But you don't have to do all of these points of attention the way that I do them. My points of attention typically contain a lot of balance, a lot of in and out, plus and minus. I kind of combine those two. So I'm paying attention to my body while expanding my senses. I'm looking at physical while imagining non-physical or spiritual energy around my body. And I hold that as long as I can throughout the day. I never go out of my body. Very rarely do I go out of my body. When the lady was yelling at me in the lobby, I felt it. I felt myself going away from my hydrostasy bubble. So my mantra, do no harm. Say nothing. Be silent. Anything you say will make it worse. Anything you say will make it worse. And I closed my eyes. I put my hands like this. They watched me on camera. And they're like, Ernest, you couldn't have done anything else other than what you did that would have been better, because any interaction with this, because it was abnormal psychology. This was a medical patient going through a fit of abnormal psychology, and it was directed towards me because I was at the front desk that day. So whoever would have been at that front desk would have got blown up on. I got blown up on in that way. So the words occurred to me, and this is as a mantra. I'm reinforcing my practice, and I said, Ernest, this has nothing to do with you. Do no harm. Think no harm. Think no harm. I don't even want to think bad thoughts about this person. That's not necessary. I don't want to judge this person. I don't know what they're going through. It's not about me right now. Although to everybody else, they could see it's all about Ernest. It's projected onto Ernest, and then people afterwards is, I don't know how you did that. Like, I would have told her about herself. And I'm like, what are you going to tell somebody in abnormal psychology about themselves? Do you expect them to understand and just be like, oh my God, you're right? I am acting like a raging maniac right now. Wow, thanks. let me be more sane now that you pointed that out. No, like, so the only thing that I could do that was the most efficient thing was what I did. And I didn't break down. I closed my eyes so that she could see I'm not responding to this right now. I put my hands up in the peaceful way so people knew I was doing it deliberately. I didn't want anybody to think I was slumping over like a broken robot or crying or something, but here I am, like, I have nothing to offer you other than this peace that I have inside of me. But I could feel myself going out of that bubble. Let me tell you, there's been times at work and things like that that I can feel myself going away from my bubble, which means I'm going away from peace. And if I do get out of it, it's not the end of the world, folks. It's not like I'm a bad person. But if I exist there, it's going to be bad for me. It's going to end up bad for me and maybe bad for other people as well. So I don't want to do that. And I'll go back to my practice. That's what the counterbalance phase of this practice is. You forget and you might go outside of your bubble, but then you remember. And the moment you remember, you start going back towards it. It's directional. The moment you remember, you start going back towards your bubble and your center of peace. So I'm going to have things today that I need to adapt to. Where is my mind and did I put it there? There are situations that I don't know how it's going to end up. I don't know where things are going to go necessarily. Where is my mind and did I put it there? Am I awake? Am I paying attention to the universe as it's flowing around me and following my desire and what I want to feel? Does that all make sense? That is fundamentally what's occurring in this tea practice. That's kind of a breakdown. Following the golden mean principle, using our attention. That creates the third pillar. It's not all that complicated, even though, as Ida pointed out, with paying attention to our body, it can feel difficult if we're not used to doing it. What I'm talking about is not tricky, really. It's not difficult at all. We were born doing it. We were born masters of attention, paying attention, looking around, absorbing, learning. We were vibrant, like we were born vibrant. True, we were crying because that shit's probably pretty traumatic, probably cold. Like we just went from 98.6 degree, like tropical conditions to what the fuck is this? I have no contextual reference for this. So, people say, well, we come out crying in pain and suffering. Oh, come on. We just don't know how to express ourselves at that, when we're born. So crying is something that we do innately. It's not psychological suffering, it's physical suffering. And that's how that's ow. That's the same thing. Like you just went, wah, basically. It's the same thing. I've never put it that way before, but there you go. So we have a world around us. We have things to adapt to. The more we keep our points of attention, the more we stay closer to our center of our circle. You have things in the future. Uncertainty. We're swimming in infinity essentially. And we're creators. We're explorers of this infinity. The more we pay attention to it, the more we're exploring the infinite. And I love that. I really like that. I'm good with that. Like it feels like alignment. But I don't know what my future is going to be 10 months from now, 1 year from now, 3 years from now. Hopefully, I'm still inside of that hydrostasy circle. Because if I am, then I'm still going to have a life of value, of peace, of joy, even if it's not going exactly how I thought it would. Does all that make sense? Well, okay. So we have a podcast again on Saturday at 8:30 and again on Sunday at 6:15. I think I got those times right. Here, let me show you. Just real quick, I can show you my website and where you can find that because I am slowly updating it. As you guys know how I do with websites. But, so this is the website, and if you just scroll down a little bit, I have this broadcast schedule. Group study Thursday, 7 a.m. Podcast Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, 8:30, and Sunday at 6:15. If it changes, I'll do my best to put it there. Jean has pointed out how sometimes I lapse on that and incorrect information exists for a while, but there you go. And then if you're looking for the video replay, I do have the last study session up. So you go to basic alignment, and then you go from basic alignment to just its category, and then it just has the video embedded. And it's up on YouTube, so you don't have to go to my website. I like it if you do, though, because then my website gets hits and it moves up the SEO. But I don't care. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. And I still have to find this, the one from the 4th. I think that's on Shayna's computer downstairs, so I have to get that one. But yeah. And so today's will go right underneath this one. And if you want to re-listen to the podcasts, there's the podcasts. Easy peasy. Any questions before we head out?
I find the dates are very helpful. The title
Okay, cool.
of it is fine, but the dates are very helpful to keep track of where I am.
Awesome. I'll keep doing that then.
Thank you.
Yep, for sure. Appreciate the feedback. The book will be coming soon. We have The Voice of Power, which is so essential to this practice. Using our words, because we're not trying to declare war on it, but we can use it deliberately in the beginning to remind ourselves of what's occurring. I am a conscious creator. I am a powerful human being when I'm in my power. I use my practice to stay in my power, so my practice is important. I can talk to myself that way. I can remind myself of things that are occurring in the world. When the woman was yelling at me, I used the voice of power. Do no harm. Say nothing. Be silent. This is the words that came to me. I'm sharing that with you. Those words occurred to me as an emergency technique to remind myself that was a voice that occurred from inner guru. This has nothing to do with you, Ernest. Just relax. It's going to pass. She will leave, or security will have to escort her out, one of the two, but neither of those have anything to do with you. Do you see what I mean?
How did it end, Ernest? Did it just fizzle out?
It fizzled out. She went in and made her purchase, and she just changed her focus.
Yeah.
Literally like a child. She went from yelling at me to, oh yeah, I'm here to buy cannabis, and then just smiled and went about her day, and everyone was just like, okay. But I am in a medical dispensary, so what do you know? There's patients there with sometimes abnormal psychology, which is what cannabis can be beneficial for. So am I surprised? I shouldn't be. Was I? Mm-hmm. I was taken a little aback, but it is what it is, you know. So The Voice of Power is a book. We'll talk about how we can interact with our own voice and make it a tool for our practice, rather than trying to declare war on it, trying to reprogram it, trying to create new habit, changing our neural pathways. Yeah, that maybe is what's occurring on a biological level, but where is my mind and did I put it there? I can understand that better. I can work with that better. That helps me cross the divide between theory and application, because my attention is either deliberate, 2 degrees, or it is not. If you pop out of the sky and say, Ernest, where is your mind? And I'm like, I was paying attention to, no. But if I pop out of the sky and I say, Gene, where is your mind? And you're like, well, today I have these points of attention, and right now, I'll be honest, it wasn't there, but these are what I'm working with today. Or it was there, and that's what I'm working with today. I'd be like, oh, okay. Ultimately, I still don't know. Although, if I follow Gene around enough, his behavior and output will reflect his practice. So if he's nervous and jittery and he gets angry and he yells at everybody, Gene, where is your mind? And he's like, oh, I have my mind on my Dantian. Well, oh, you did while you were yelling at the child for doing something that a child does? And Gene would never do this, but it's just an example that came to me, and he has his video unmuted, so that's what happens. If you have your video on, I use you as the example, even if it's totally fictional. Gene would never yell at a child, I'm sure. Not for being a child, that would make no sense. All right. Well, I will see you guys again I will hear you guys again on Saturday for the podcast as I drive to work at 8:30 if you can make it. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a good rest of the Friday and Saturday. Wait, Thursday and Friday, whatever it is. And I will see you guys again soon. And I'll put this recording up just as soon as I can, probably today. I have some harvesting to do, so my allergies are going to really kick in because those plants are stinky. But I will see you guys again soon. Maybe later I'll talk about how I've started to canna-fast. I only consume cannabis at certain times now because I don't feel like I need it anymore. So I didn't declare war on it. I didn't try to control it. But then I woke up and I'm like, I feel like I got THC in me. Like I feel my cannabinoid system is activated in my body without the substance. So I haven't been consuming as much. That's dissolving. Those habits are starting to break up on their own. I don't need to control it. I don't need to try to manipulate it. It might not happen as fast as other people would like it to, but I'm doing my thing. So slowly but surely, I could see myself using cannabis only as an emergency technique somewhere down the road, or just keep it on hand, maybe just in case. But I could definitely see myself not consuming hardly at all. Why? I mean, or why not? Either way, doesn't really make much difference to me. It is an excellent tool of attention and can help provide extra body awareness. And if it's used as that, or used for recreational purposes, hell, I don't care. If a little bit of cannabis helps you feel a little bit of peace, who am I to judge? I'm not going to. So I don't need to think thought streams about that. It's not my place. I've been there too, so who the hell would I be to judge? I use cannabis a little bit differently. This is one reason why I haven't really hung out with people outside of work. I don't really collaborate with cannabis in this way. I don't smoke a blunt to play a video game necessarily. I'll consume just enough cannabis so that it creates this feeling, and I like the feeling. The plant and I collaborate together, and we vibe. And I'm vibing with the plant right now after having consumed nothing. Like I can still feel it. Like it's something different. I feel like I'm activating my cannabinoid system with my mind. But Gene, I have no scientific evidence for that. So that's just, yeah, maybe I'm not. I don't know. But either way, I will see you guys on Saturday. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate you guys, and I'll put the replay up promptly. All right. I love you guys. Have a great day. See you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Ernest.
You're
Bye.
welcome, Edith.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Karen. See you guys later.